Yes. Okay. There we are.
Hey.
Hello. Good
Hi.
morning.
Very good morning. It's about 7:30 in the morning. Same for you, of course. Maybe early
Yes.
for some people around the world, or very late.
Yes. And well, I think in North America it's late afternoon, depending on which side of North America you're in. Um, and yeah, this is definitely early for us over here on this side of the world. Um, so um, it's still a pertinent topic, I think, for us to discuss um, in the animal rights movement, even if we've been inactive as a result of COVID-19 for the last year. Our organization certainly has been inactive, comparably so, for the last year. We haven't been doing as many cubes around the world. We haven't been doing as much in the way of campaigns, and the things that we had planned for the last year, we've been, yeah, rather inactive than we would like to be. But mental health is still a pertinent issue because, you know, people deal with this every day, dealing with family and friends and just navigating through this non-vegan world as an animal rights activist. It's tough. And the reason why we're doing this, and before I do get into the premise for this live stream, let me just introduce Claire for those who don't know Claire. Um, Claire is a vegan psychologist. I would say the vegan psychologist. um, and perhaps you could just tell people, Claire, a little bit about your history with mental health and some of your books that you've written. I certainly know of you initially from the book that you wrote called Dystopia, which is about a vegan dystopia. But perhaps you could tell people a bit more.
Sure. Well, firstly, hello to everybody, and thank you for staying the course. Because although we may not be on the streets as much, or at all in some places, we are always activists, and there's always an opportunity for a conversation. And I think we need to bear that in mind. Is if we can come away from every exchange knowing we've nudged people in the right direction, and whilst we're waiting to get out and really show people the truth in a very meaningful way. So, yes, I am both a psychologist and a vegan. And it was because of mental health issues amongst the vegan community, understandably, I might say, that I decided to call myself a vegan psychologist. And it gave people the opportunity to not be what we call pathologized, made to feel sick or there's something wrong because we feel the distress we do. Now, vegans, of course, have all sorts of mental health challenges anyway. We have normal life problems, and then we throw dystopia on the top, the anguish of being a vegan in a non-vegan world. And so we have relationship problems, we have your body image problems, money problems, job problems, challenges. Some people have horrific, backgrounds and histories. They come to that, and then we find out about what goes on with animals. And what I was finding is that doctors and psychiatrists were saying, oh, these people have eating disorders, when some vegans do have eating disorders, but they certainly don't because they're not eating animals. Or they have social adjustment. They're not going to Thanksgiving or Christmas and eating the same things. And most concerning for me was that vegans have self-harming tendencies, and that's why they're watching footage. Now, that is the dystopia we talk about in the non-vegan, the carnist world. And that's why it's so important for us to break that almost magical spell, because it's tantamount to the evil, actually. Because what we know about what's going on with animals is we don't have to ask, why are people feeling depressed and anxious and hopeless? And sometimes act out these things, overeat, overdrink, self-harm. And many people feel suicidal. And Paul, I've been, and you might like to comment on this myself, and it's a very important topic to talk about, because, suicide is when we no longer want to be here. We can't find a reason for living. And yet I've been sadly, and pleased at the same time, that the suicide does not become an option really for many activists, because they may feel suicidal, but they actually say, well, what about the animals? How can I leave them? What's your experience of that, Paul?
Yeah, no, I felt that way too. I felt like my existence on this planet needs to continue in order to have a fighting chance for the animals, because there's so few of us that are actually fighting for the animals and
Yeah,
doing an effective job at doing so.
I absolutely agree with you. Um, so number one, if you're there feeling anxious and hopeless and and you're angry all the time, because there's a lot to be angry about. When we're angry, it's because something we value is being violated, and abuse for animals. As we know, we don't even have to like animals, and that's a silly excuse people often say. That's why we go out to the streets. We like animals. Paul, you're on the same. We're both on the same page here. It's not about liking animals. That would be something to do with us, wouldn't it? Animals lucky that we're going to like them and we'll get out there and do something. It's a social justice issue,
Exactly.
and we know it's wrong. So this is very important. So in
Yeah.
calling myself out, I guess a lot of people came forward with an absolute sense of relief that someone could stand up to these bodies for a start, and I certainly do. But also give us a language and a way, a path through that. And I think Anonymous with the Voices has been a fabulous platform for people to channel their distress into positive action for change. And I can honestly say, Paul, in 11 years of being a vegan, 30 of being oh gosh, before, let's have a look, 30 of years I was a vegetarian, thinking I was allergic to dairy products, but of course I wasn't a baby calf. But nobody told me. Now, if somebody had been, when I became a vegetarian, but thank God I didn't actually have dairy products. There was some sort of divine pat on the back there. Because I actually read about what happened in a slaughterhouse. So what we do is very powerful. And people say, oh, does it really work? Well, it certainly changed me, and it changed Paul, and it changed many, many people on this call. People come to this very differently, of course. So yeah, I have written Dystopia, the anguish of being vegan, non-vegan world, with lots of interviews from people and contributions as case studies in there. And we find our story in there. I am a telling witness to the anguish of being vegan in a non-vegan world. And so that's why I wrote it. But I also wrote another one called Myths of Choice, why people won't change and what we can do about it. We can perhaps talk about that later. I've got a little free
Yeah.
4-part program people can access, because that's when we get stuck, isn't it, Paul, when we tell people about these things.
Yeah, I want the viewers to know that what we're doing with this live stream is we're going to do our best to provide you with resources, with tools that will help you to effectively manage your mental health and navigate through this non-vegan world with more support and like I said, with tools that will help you. So we'll get into that, but I think it would be good for us to discuss um, a bit further to begin with what the symptoms of mental health problems look like exactly when you're an animal rights activist in this non-vegan world. Someone asked, I'm not sure which are the symptoms of mental health. I get angry, I get sad, but I don't think that I have mental health issues. Can we clarify the symptoms?
Yeah,
What do you think, Claire?
yeah. And
What
I
are the
think we need,
symptoms?
and let's clarify what mental health and mental illness is. You know, mental health and well-being is not the absence of disease. It's when we feel alive, we feel purpose, we feel physically and emotionally strong, we are connected to other people, we feel we belong, we have purpose, we have some autonomy in the world. We're not, so that's all to do with health and well-being, a sense of all-rounded safety in the world, and then beyond that, to be able to say, well, what am I here for? And that's just the general public. Problems come up for all sorts of reasons, but as an animal rights activist, it would be wrong to say we didn't. Think of it like a continuum. I think that's the best way. So everybody is going to feel angry, depressed, upset, anxious, obsessive sometimes in the normal course of their life. Really when we can say somebody is mentally ill, it's when they can no longer function effectively. Now, right at the end of the extreme of that, of course, is some people can't get out of bed. Some people harm themselves so much through substances, through cutting themselves, through I say I haven't seen as much alcohol abuse as or drug abuse would be, but using it in a way where it's so destructive, people can't go to work, they can't function, they whatever they do won't make a difference. But we are going to think of it like a continuum. There's going to be there's things we see. How can we possibly feel good about this? But what we can do is when we transmute that into positive action and we make real changes for the animals, we get nearer, we know our spirits lift. When somebody is mentally ill, they often withdraw from the movement, thinking anything I do will not make a difference. And then they can't function in everyday life. They can't keep a job down. I know many people probably have lost their jobs actually over this last year, and that's a huge extra stress on people. So does that answer so there is sadness, there's anxiety, there's depression, pushing down or feeling pushed down. We then get other symptoms, which it is mental illness in a way because it doesn't allow us to function, although not perhaps labeled as that. Misanthropy, we hate other people. We say, how can people be so evil? And we told them about this and why can't they change? And we can circle back to that in a moment. Some people are so distressed we can get like what we call a psychological split. It's a much bigger debate to talk about things like schizophrenia and things like that. And there's all sorts of views that, clearly, or people can't function in the world they say, have a very distorted sense of reality. But there's a whole body of literature out there that says, is it escape into madness or from madness, the madness of our normality and what is going on under the scenes? It's nice society on the face of it, and yet we know there's a horror story to animals, to people, to planet. So I've given you a quick sort of overview there without giving you a great big long list of mental illnesses.
Yeah, I think I think what we're doing is just addressing, things that people should be aware of, if they're experiencing these kinds of feelings and these kinds of thoughts of sadness and depression and hopelessness. It's important to understand the source. And, with mental health, I'll just say straight off the bat that I didn't take mental health as seriously until recently. I think I've been humbled by this lockdown over the last year because it forced me to go within more and realize that I am affected a lot by the state of the world, and it's having a real impact on me. And I didn't quite realize how strong of an impact it was having on me until I had time to just stop and reflect. And I used to sort of be a bit more I don't want to say unforgiving, because I definitely understood mental health was a factor, but I used to be a bit more I used to just sort of think we should be getting on with it. If we're experiencing these things, we should just be getting on with it, getting back to work. The animals have it much worse than us, and perhaps I was being a bit too macho about this whole topic. And self-care in this movement, I think, has been a topic that keeps coming up for many activists. But what I've always felt is that self-care as a topic tends to get blown out of proportion, in my view, because those who seem to be wrapped up in the self-care stuff, they tend to stop doing as much activism. And so what I hope to achieve from this live stream with you, Claire, is to discuss mental health, how we can manage our mental health, with the end goal being us being more active than we currently are, but just having the right tools and resources so that we can be strong activists. And I just want to say, in terms of symptoms, Um, I tend to focus on, I like to think about the root cause of a problem and focus on addressing that and healing that. And I think that what essentially is happening when it comes to mental health as an animal rights activist in a non-vegan world, and I say a non-vegan world because, as you know, majority of the world is non-vegan, but I would like to say a vegan world, you know, because that's what we're aiming to attract and create in the world. Um, a not yet vegan world would probably be the best way to explain it. Um, but I think I need to just reference a quote from George Orwell because it can be very maddening to be an animal rights activist in this world. And one thing that George Orwell said is that the further a society drifts from truth, the more that people will be angry at those who speak it. And that's what we do, is we speak the truth. You know, there is no justification for needlessly tormenting animals who suffer no different in all the ways that matter to humans, to the very people that we're trying to wake up when we speak about this topic. And we are made to feel, I'll say made to feel, but we have a choice, don't we? We don't have to feel this way, but non-vegans bully us into feeling like we are crazy, that they make us, they bully us into feeling like we are a part of a cult, that we're part of some kind of extreme regime, and that we are um, a mockery. What we think and what we care about is a mockery. And they bully us into thinking that there's no point, you know, this defeatist attitude that they project onto us. There's no point in even fighting against this injustice. You're never going to win. There's no point in trying to convince people. And because there's so much of this happening from non-vegans, vegans tend to give up. We tend to become less vocal and ultimately feel hopeless and sad and depressed. And the biggest culprit is family. Vegans dealing with family has to be the number one question I get during my live streams when I do Q&As. How do I deal with family? How do I deal with my partner? How do I deal with relationships? And even friends? But family is the biggest one. And I want to talk about that a little bit with you, Claire, because, you know, I know with my situation, it's also been a huge thing. Um, you know me a little bit, and I've expressed to you my situation with my family before, and just for others to know, um, you know, for years I didn't talk to my family because of this issue. Um, you know, I explain things to them, and they just don't get it. They just don't. They choose not to get it. And I'm very clear about how I talk about this subject. I'm very easy to understand. Um, I don't think I can describe um, how wrong it is to be not vegan in this world, how unjustified it is. And yet they're still not vegan to this day. And they still don't really understand. They're choosing to not understand what I even do. My dad asked me just over the weekend on Sunday if I am eating fish, and he wasn't joking. He asked me if I was eating fish. And I had to pause. I really couldn't believe that he was asking me that question. Um, you know, it's just mind-boggling. But yeah, so you know, I think people struggle with family quite a bit because it causes you to question yourself and make you think that did I go wrong somewhere? Am I missing something here? Because I'm the only one who seems to give a shit about this topic. And they, as I said, non-vegans, whether they're doing this consciously or subconsciously, I feel like what they're doing is bullying us, those who speak the truth, in a society that has drifted so far away from truth, especially when it comes to this topic, into feeling like we have gone the wrong route in our lives somewhere, somehow. We have chosen to become incessant and obsessed or extreme about this particular topic, and we just can't let it go and we can't drop it. And that's the way that we're bullied into feeling and thinking. What do you think about what I've said there, Claire? How do you
Yeah.
feel about family and what kind of an impact it can have on vegans and animal rights activists?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. The majority of things that I come across is, one's family problems, because, we're born into a family. They can't know us before we know ourselves. My own family are not vegan. I'm talking about my extended family, my immediate family, yes. My partner, my dogs, but in terms of, my brothers and sisters, I have a member of the family who thinks I'm in a cult, you know. It's so mind-blowing for us, isn't it? A cult of not doing what we know or they're paying for to do to animals. My father is 97, by the way, and he doesn't really know who I am anymore. And I have a picture of him looking at Dystopia, and it's quite extraordinary. He wanted to know what veganism was, and he was told at the age of 95, so that was really nice. But and not told the dietary issues. So, but it is, family issues are absolutely huge, and because I think a lot of where depression comes from is we need to belong, we need to connect. And we just think, so many of us, we'll just have to go home and tell our family, they told us, they encouraged us to listen, a lot of our families, if we got good families. They wanted us to know about us, but they put the blankers down on this. And so, and we're the one who's wrong, who's preachy, why can't you just be, why do you have to upset everything? We've always done it like this. Now, one of the biggest issues, of course, is conformity. If you want any evidence of conformity, we need to look at what's happening in our world. People are blindly, without questioning, doing a lot of things at the moment without even a little bit of research. And so people don't want to be outside the crowd. And so they look at what the majority do, which is to eat animals. We've always eaten this. We know all these silly excuses. I don't need to bring them up. The government would never allow it, and animals overrun the world, all the nonsense we hear. Because when we hold up a mirror, whether it's to a friend or a family member, and we do something differently, at some level, we're saying what they do is not right. Let me give you an example. For those people perhaps who have moved away from the city they're born in or moved away from the country, I hear this repeatedly. It's my experience. I come from England. I live in Australia. You go back and then there's a cursory sort of how's it going in the new land, even when you just move. And then it's back to local issues. And if you dare to even share things or say things, and it's been my experience, and people tell me this, is, well, you're the one who left. It's not all it's cracked up to be. And it's not about a country or a place being better or worse. And I think, but it's whatever way you cut it, you're saying what you do is not what I want to do. And I think people look around and it's a challenge because at some level, possibly unconsciously, they know that how they're living, certainly how they're eating, what they're doing is not okay. And they can't bury it under what everyone else does. It's not my fault and that's what we do and I have to do it to survive. Because we're there as a normal human being saying, well, I'm perfectly healthy and I'm also prepared to stand up against the majority. So I must feel really strongly about this, or else why would I be pushed about? And so it's understanding the symptom is we're holding up a mirror, and the way to do it is squash the messenger, of course. And not everybody's experiences are like this. Sometimes, I hear great stories of vegans that go home and their family usually try to do it to be nice to them or whatever. And the more they move into that area, they're then able to see the imperative of what we're doing here. And that's why, and it's so important, and I know people on this, we're very much at the cutting edge. We think if we can just get them on a bit of diet, if we can just get them on a bit of change their diet once a week or whatever, because they'll be nearer. ultimately we have to get them on the ethics. We have to get them to empathize with the suffering. The rest is easy. It's even more easy than living in a non-vegan world, as we know. So I think there's a lovely book actually by Johann Hari, and it's called Lost Connections. And he reviews all the literature on depression, which always used to be thought as a chemical imbalance. And that's sort of largely been discredited, although I will come back to happy hormones and troubling hormones in a moment that make us sad. It's and he talks, it's lost connections or depression, lost connections with family, with community, with, I mean, how many people have told me, and we've talked ourselves, Paul, I feel it, things we did before are utterly trivial. You know, I'm not a big theatre goer, but in the past I lived in London. I'd be invited occasionally. Did I like it? I'm not too sure. But but you know, I might have made it okay with friends. Now I saw it as a waste of time. It seems trivial. So this sort of happens. Everything we do, we can actually end up feeling guilty. And I think that's really important in terms of a solution. The animals need us to be well and to be resourced. So self-care becomes a way of putting emotional credit back in the bank so that we can live on this planet without the everyday sharp anguish, to actually also being resourced enough to do what the animals need us to do. We can't do that if we're falling over. So and there's some definite things we need to put in place. I can talk about them now, Paul, or I'll just wheel back to you for a moment. But family are a major issue because also I think there can be some sort of shame. We feel shamed. Is how can my family be like this? Are they psychopaths? How can they, you know, they were a good marker whether your family's a psychopath or not is probably, you know, when you ask them to watch something and they go, oh no, I don't want to watch that. Now, if they just said, nah, I don't really care, bring it on, we'd have a real problem. When people wince, they know it's because it's horrific and they think it's horrible, and there is a chink of consciousness there. So don't waste that. When people go, oh, please don't, oh no, I don't, I get upset. I'm one of those people that get upset by it. As if the vegans aren't. You know, they're so upset by it, they'll throw themselves and actually go into the slaughterhouse and actually stand at the vigils, go into the testing lab, because our pain of what we witness with our eyes is minuscule relative to what they experience with their bodies. But we get this sort of, but when they say that, that is a chink of awareness. We've just got to have some real strategies to break through that. And if we come away from every conversation knowing we push them in the right direction, that is going to be good for our mental health and keep us to the course.
Yes. Yeah, we said a lot of great things there. Yeah, I think that family is the biggest culprit because we are part of our family we have a deep affinity with our family, don't we? And it's a lot harder to deal with people who you've known your whole life, who even look like you. They have, you know, similar genetics to you, and they're looking at you and telling you that they don't care about this topic. Or like you said, you know, they wince at the thought of watching Dominion or some real footage of what's going on, and they tell you, they show you that they care essentially underneath all of those uh, layers of programming that they're living in. Um, they show you that they care, but they also show you that they are not willing to break out of that conditioning, and they want to just continue being needlessly violent towards animals. Um, I certainly have that issue. Um, you know, like I think my dad, um, when I think back, you know, like there was a time when he accidentally killed a kitten that we had in our house. We had a kitten once, and when I was a kid, this kitten was sleeping on the footsteps, and he walked outside and accidentally stepped on the kitten and killed this kitten. And a few days later, I saw him crying, and I asked him why he was crying, and he said it was because of the cat. Um, uh, I think about things like this, and I just wonder where that care factor that he seemingly has for some animals has gone. I've also seen him care for birds that seemingly were in distress and needed water or just needed some help. Um, with my mother, I don't think that she's overtly cruel. Like if she was, like most non-vegans, if they were actually put in a situation where you gave them the knife, um, I don't think that they would actually enact what it takes to turn an animal into a hamburger. Um, and so it's maddening to deal with family when you know that this is the case. Um, and yeah, I just think that essentially what I want for people to understand is that health is extremely important as an animal rights activist. If you're on a mission to change this world and to make truth the dominant mindset and the dominant way of thinking um, and acting in this world, and justice obviously is if that's a goal of yours to achieve justice for non-human animals, then you need to be healthy. Um, your health is number one. Everything comes after health, no matter what your mission is. Health is number one, and everything else is after that. Um, and mental health is a big part of your health, but I think a lot of people think of mental health as separate to your physical health and your emotional health, and that's one thing that people need to understand is that it's inextricably linked, and it's a huge part of your overall health. In fact, I would say that mental health is number one, and everything else in your physical health and your emotional health is after that. I would say it's secondary, because everything is a thought. Everything starts with a thought, and your brain is arguably the most important aspect of you, and your physical makeup. Um, and so I'm just saying that because I think people should prioritize their mental health, and that's one thing I've learned. Um, with my own family, I didn't talk to them for years, but recently I've rekindled with them, and I've found a way, and I still don't feel 100% about it, to be honest. But I think I found a way to just separate um, what I do as an activist a little bit from my relationship with them, um, by seeing my family in small doses. Um, I see them once every couple of weeks or a few weeks, and I see them for about an hour. Um, and I make sure that I give my mother a hug, and I make sure I tell her that I love her, and I make sure that I show my dad love. And my grandmother's nearly dead. She's withering away at the moment, and she's got dementia, so she doesn't even understand who I am anymore. So I just make sure I'm there and I'm present, and I show her love and I give her hugs, and that feels good for me. Um, and I know that my family really appreciate it, and my mother. I know that my mother loves me. Um, in unexplainable ways. She loves me incredibly, and my father as well. But there's always this barrier between us that exists, and like I said, when my own dad asked me if I was eating fish, it just reminded me again, like my parents don't even know who I am. They don't even know that I spend every day of my life fighting against non-human animal rights injustices and violations. And I would never, and I said I had to be very clear with him, which I always am, but he just tends to forget, because anytime I open my mouth about these things, he just in his mind tells himself, or when my parents talk to me about this, they just in their mind they shut off, because they tell themselves that I'm just crazy and I'm speaking from my dogma and my they think I'm speaking from some ideological position or something like that. And so they just shut off. But I had to tell my dad, look, you know, just to be very clear with you from now on, I will never eat an animal's body part or anything that comes out of an animal. For the rest of my life, I will be vegan, someone who eats plants, and I will never eat anything that comes from an animal. Even if a doctor tells me that I need to for my health, I still will not do it. Just to be super clear with you, and I don't, I don't think he got it. I still don't think he got it, and that's painful. That's really painful because one thing that I think everybody wants from their parents, at the very least, is to be acknowledged for who you are and for them to understand who you are, you know. So I have to say in the comments, there are a lot of trolls, and I'm just going to start hiding people from this stream. We do get a lot of trolls on this account, but there are a lot of people who are watching this stream right now that need this information, which is good to see. So don't mind me. I'm just gonna do some admin here.
Yeah, but actually,
But
just
yeah,
those.
what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'll just say something about trolls for a start. I think if we think there are some really sick people out there that gratuitously say, hey, yeah, bring this on, you know, that's really concerning. A lot of people are paid by big industries to do this, to try and shift opinion and then make, you know, they're paid a lot of money. There's a lot of automation. So, you know, try not to give any energy to that, I find, as people listening to this. If we thought there were people out there really getting up early or late at night and really trying to talk about cruelty to animals, yes, there are people like that, but a lot of people are, that's their job, you know, they're getting paid a pittance, by the way, to actually be those people. And, you know, so let's just put that to that side. But with the family, yes, I think people, we've got to realize we're up against billion-dollar industries that actually spend a huge amount of money separating the suffering from what happens in the shrink wrap in the supermarket. And so, in speaking to your family, Paul, it's like, well, what do you mean you don't eat fish? They don't suffer, do they? Well, they don't have vocal cords. They certainly do, as we know. And there's great documentary Seaspiracy coming out soon, which many of us have seen the trailer for that. Is people have not empathized with the suffering because it's years of indoctrination. And I think Gary Yourofsky does this beautifully. It is our first ism, you know, where a baby learns to play with a little bunny or a little baby fluffy lamb, and then they're given a lamb chop to eat. And before they're even, you know, totally integrated in the family, that's become normal. And so, and they see it as a clunk of something. I spoke to someone the other day and I was shocked. It was a 10-year-old, and her father's vegan. And sorry, it's a boy. I do apologize. Two boys, and one boy said to his dad, "Well, where's a beef burger? Where's a beef burger?" And he said, "Well, it comes from a cow's body." And the kid said, "The guy's only been vegan a short while." He said, "Are you serious? It comes from a cow's body?" That is, you could actually argue, you know, what has parent been doing, but that's not the case, because I've come across kids that actually, they're not having those discussions. Meat is a burger. It's something in something. And people have worked incredibly hard for people not to know this. And so in facing your family, there's also the thing is majority of families, we got a good enough family, did their best to look after us, keep us safe, send us to school, put a roof over our heads, and hopefully love us. And I know a lot of people on here that haven't had that basis. But I think there's a bit of shame as well, Paul, is you're coming back and questioning everything they do. And when we say, remember the way you used to feed me? Remember the way all the traditions and all that? So we can't do that anymore. And, you know, sometimes for many parents, they're holding on to that. They feel shame. And instead of feeling shame, I'm a bad parent, it's like we want them to partner with us and go, yeah, we've all been duped here. And that's where, if we partner, there's a strategy, is actually use the word we. Hey, Mum, you and I have been lied to. Because if we go in and we're all this born again, holier than thou sort of vegan, and they're all doing a horrible thing, because they say, oh, don't make me feel guilty, or don't tell me what to do. Those are telltale signs. is that it's knowing it's someone's self-esteem, their identity in the world, as a parent, as a brother, as a sibling. They've been told a lot what to do in their life, or their boss, and then we're going to come along and tell them they can't eat that. So say, hey, look, we've all been duped here. And another thing is, just in terms of warding off these or reactions, don't do all the heavy lifting. Ask questions. You know, why do you always tell us what to do and eat? What is it you think makes me do that, Mum? You know, pass it back to her. Because when people have to answer a question, number one, we're giving them a bit of floor space to answer. They can't blame us for doing all this, the speaking. And actually, they then have to get an image or an association in their head to answer the question. So what do you think it is wrong about eating baby cows, Mum? You know, they have to get the image of the baby cow. Whereas if we're talking to them, it's like the communication table tennis, and it becomes Paul's telling me what to do when we actually ask them. So this is very important. I think there's two aspects of us maintaining our physical and emotional health, but also, you know, living in this world as a vegan. It's increasing self-awareness of us as the tool for change. And that's the physical and emotional health we'll look at, and mental health. We'll look at that in a second. And then it's the communication, is the sharing of information, knowing that we're nudging them in the right direction. And we could look the animals in the face and say, I did my best today. You know, we didn't just get a quick win and we were nasty to people and we feel good in a moment, but we know it ain't going to change anything. So that's important. But let's go back to physical health. Is we're the instrument for change for animals. And, you know, I can still say that, you know, I was sent something the other day of what's happening in the exotic skin trade. And, you know, I was brought to my knees. You know, something else you learn. And I don't need to tell people, you'll see it at some stage. It's very, very painful. So if we're going to be the instrument for change, you know, our physical, our emotional, and our mental health is intimately linked. What we eat, we've got happy hormones and sad hormones, or so let's have a look at our happy hormones. Serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine. We feel hope, we feel trust, we feel safe. 80 to 90% of serotonin, the happy hormone, is created in the gut. So if we're eating a highly processed diet, we're not eating properly. I have a coffee with me now, but, you know, we're eating a massive amount of caffeine. We're, you know, not drinking water. We're not having primarily a whole food plant-based diet as much as we can, some raw food. That is affecting our ability, we're a bit of an uphill struggle, to create those hormones of trust, hope, safety. So, you know, physical health is really important. Sleep is another one. People say, you know, I don't need all this sort of sleep, you know, whatever. All of us do. All animals, all mammals, insects sleep. But there's something very important that happens in about the fourth. There's different cycles. There's some wonderful videos you can look at. But we go through different cycles of sleep. When it gets to about the third cycle, we go into the deeper sleep and up through it again. There's really something cool that happens. At the top of our spinal column, it opens and it passes a fluid across the brain that processes or anesthetizes, washes, whatever we want to call it, extremely emotional experiences of the day. Now, I didn't know that. That's really cool. Now, that's why people with post-traumatic stress disorder, i.e. and vegans can activists can suffer from this. Of course, I think we do when we have to work through that. It interferes with our sleep because we're woken up by nightmares or flashbacks. And if we're not having that process to process those emotions, again, we're on an uphill struggle. So if we can, you know, we're feeling traumatized all the time, we're not going to be as efficient and effective in speaking out about animals. So physical health, sleep, some exercise. We move those more challenging hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, out of our body. If we wake up in the middle of the night, people who are depressed will wake up at about 3 or 4 in the morning. Often the first thing a doctor will ask us, and it's cortisol that wakes us up, which is a fight or flight sort of hormone. Okay, so all of these things, our physical health is important. In terms of our emotional health, thoughts are things. We've got to find a way not to squash it down and distract ourselves because it'll just pop up again, is to exchange that for the hope of the vegan world, the freedom for liberation, the action that we take. Because somebody asked me the other day, you know, Claire, I feel such emotional pain. I'm in agony. We feel this, don't we? It can be a physical pain when we see what's happening to animals. But if you think about it, emotional pain is what our brains, our minds make of our feelings. So we feel physical anguish, we feel gutted, we feel anger, we feel rage, we feel sadness, grief. And our minds make of that, and we tell the story around it is, oh my gosh, will it ever change? How can people do this? That's what's causing our emotional pain. Now, processing that, talking to other people, not to just make ourselves feel worse. Debriefing is really important. But then elect with other vegans, other friends, just even one person, pick up the thing on Messenger, get on the phone to people, say, okay, what can we now do to turn, excuse my language, our shit compost, which is what we want. Okay. So it's debriefing with other people. I'm a great advocate of meditation. I've put a 10-minute meditation on the Vegan Psychologist, working on neuroscience principles. Neuroscience is the science of the nervous system. When there are thoughts, feelings, memories, hormones. So let's think, we see something painful. We go, oh my God, that's animal. We feel angry at the person doing it. Cortisol, adrenaline pumps into our body. We link it to a previous, oh my God, will it ever change? And we feel physically ill. So what happens is a little cycle gets set up. Thought, feeling, action, hormone, memory, that we only have to see something flash up on Instagram or Facebook. And it triggers that whole thing. We start thinking it again. We feel it again. And when we talk about things being hardwired, it's when that thought, feeling, action, hormone gets literally a little cycle that we can't even break away from that. We have a moment, we immediately go there and feel awful. The little grooves in our brain, when you take a skull off and you've seen a brain, like this empty brain, and those little grooves get deeper. So it's like they get deeply entrenched. However, when we feel good things, we feel hope, we feel connected to others, we feel we're making a move in this movement, we feel people become vegan. We're getting the message out there. We feel connected to other people, that we're not alone. We hear these a rising tide raises all boats, by the way. So everything we do is making a difference. That can be also hardwired. We can see dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, hope, trust. We feel good memories, we feel that good. And aren't we better to actually advocate when we're there? Now we can train ourselves to move, a little bit of self-hypnosis, when we slow our brain down, our breathing, to move from those more challenging experiences to the hope and the freedom and the vegan world. We've got a vision of vegan world, because then our bodies come along for the ride. We're more able to then advocate. Because people say to me, how do you do this, Claire? I go to vigils. I've been in the slaughterhouse. I've watched Dominion more times and emceed it than I care to think. And it causes me more problems every time, I will be very honest. But I'm able to turn that despair into powerful action for change. And so, there's some free resources on the Vegan Psychologist. Is learn to do that and just see it as you're putting credit back in your emotional bank. So physical health, become very aware of feeding the negative thoughts. Oh my God, it'll never change. I hate my family. These are powerful words, and they create those hormonal conditions. I never say, well, we'll never see a vegan world. We haven't seen one yet. Or how can I be hopeful yet? Change that. It is positive psychology, really. And the animals need us to be hopeful. Hopelessness in an activist is the worst thing. And honestly, I don't want to be hard on people. Well, I'm going to be a little bit hard. We don't have the luxury to walk away from this. We really don't. But at the same time, don't minimize your distress. Don't minimize that this is very painful to go through. But there is a way to transmute that into powerful action to change, and have some downtime with people as well, to watch a funny movie. I watch Films for Change, set up by a fantastic vegan in Sydney, who set up the Sydney Vegan Club, which is all positive stuff, which is actually will make us feel hopeful, give us projects around the world that we're doing, that are really hopeful. Watch comedy. It changes our physical state, and have downtime, knowing that we've got to get out there and keep doing this.
Yes. Just recently I went live from the Cube in Melbourne, and I was really honest about how I was feeling. This was a few weeks ago now, and I was having one of those cubes, because not every cube is the same. even within the same location, doing it at the same time each week in Melbourne. Not every cube is the same. Some cubes, everything is just rolling, and people that stop are more open-minded, and you have fantastic interactions where people are listening, they get it, and they say very convincingly that they are going to stop being animal abusers. They're going to start being vegan. And then you have days where everybody wants to argue with you, and everybody's entitled, and everybody's angry at you and wants to fight you even, um, or they just don't stop to talk. And I was having one of those days, and I just went live and I just told everybody raw, and I was being honest about how I was feeling. And how I was feeling was, I don't know how much longer I can do this. You know, I've been doing this for 5 years now, out on the streets and also overseeing chapters around the world. We've had over 1,000 chapters. You know, that means 1,000 cities doing what we're doing, and I've been overseeing all of this with Asal. And you know, I've been out on the streets physically since day one. Um, and I was saying, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I don't know how many years I can actually do this. You know, it might be 15, 20. I don't know what the number is, but um, I don't know how many years I can be out there on the streets talking to non-vegans saying the same shit over and over and over, because non-vegans are like a broken record. They say the same shit. Um, you know, it's truly maddening to hear the same arguments. I mean, I could tell you exactly what non-vegans are going to say before they even say it. Um, and it's just the same shit. You know, my ancestors ate meat and circle of life, and we've always done this. So what's the point in changing? There are many other problems in the world. Humane slaughter. You know, we can do this, and we don't need to stop doing this. We just need to find a different way to do this. Um, you know, plants have feelings. God says it's okay. So, and all of these things are just so pathetic and ridiculous. And the truth is that these kinds of justifications are never used to justify any other kind of injustice. That just shows how pathetic and ridiculous the arguments are. That arguments that wouldn't even last 1 second in an attempt to justify any other type of injustice are used to attempt to justify this injustice. And then we find ourselves as animal rights activists having to explain things that are extremely, we shouldn't have to explain these things to non-vegans. They're extremely um, basic things, like, you know, plants don't have feelings. Like, we have to explain this to non-vegans, uh, that cutting grass is different to slicing an animal in the throat. Um, we we are made to feel that we have to explain this shit to non-vegans, and baby people at the highest degree to get them to understand basic truth about the way that the world works. Um, it's extremely maddening. It's extremely frustrating. And how do we keep from becoming misanthropic? Because I also know that, not that, you know, as an animal rights activist, um, you're dealing with two things: one, non-vegan nonsense, and two, vegans. And depending on the day, vegans can be much worse to deal with than non-vegans. Um, for me, mostly recently at least, non-vegans have been more maddening and frustrating to me. Um, but how do we keep knowing the challenges that we have? from being misanthropic? You've mentioned some things, but let's just talk about this, because I think that that's ultimately where we end up. When we look at Gary, for example, and the way that he's gone, he's become quite misanthropic. I wouldn't say that he is a misanthrope, because he's actually uh, still very caring and loving towards humans, but he's quite misanthropic, and I can understand exactly where he's coming from. But that seems to be where it ends up if we don't have this in check and we know exactly how to manage our mental health. And so, how do we become resilient and even more active than we currently are, whilst avoiding misanthropy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Paul, I'm also just aware of time, only in terms of my day beginning in a moment. You know, if we could spend another 5 minutes, if that's
Oh,
okay.
yes.
Reconnect with people, just so it shows how big this area is, and I'm happy to give far more time. You're absolutely right. I mean, we've heard all the arguments, haven't we? And they really are quite pathetic. I think seeing people as being, I think a lot of people have suddenly started to realize they're part of a socioeconomic slavery system themselves. And they think they've got freedom. We can choose our own job that we want, our own partner, where I want to live, you know, but it's all within constraints, as we know, of the reality of a monetary system or whatever. Then we come along and say, hey, you know that one thing you do 3 times a day, which people don't really question, which is what you eat? Well, you can't do that anymore. And so the reaction and the silly arguments we hear out of proportion to the threat. And so we're tapping into, they realize they're not free at all. And I think they're reacting unconsciously about a lot of things. That's why we get this absolute nonsense. You know, can we just be cruel a little bit, you know, without them suffering as much? Absolute nonsense. You know, so it's also realizing so that people are part of a level of trance that is quite unbelievable. And even before they became vegan, they probably went along with a lot more things and were swayed by other people a lot more than perhaps the vegans. Not always. They weren't prepared to stand outside. I think we've got to realize that most people follow. In Sydney, Australia, I'm not the same colour. We have bins for recycling rubbish. As to whether it gets recycled, that's another debate. We'll have another day. But the reality is they're yellow bins. And I say to people, people put their rubbish in the yellow bin, not because they're environmentalists, because that's what we do. And so we know when we look at all market research, and I know some of the animal protection groups have done this, is we are what we call the innovators. There's about in every social change, whether it's uptake of mobile phones 20 years ago, anything, and veganism is one of them, it's about our innovators usually reach about 2.8%. When you get 2.8% of a population doing anything, becoming activists and vegans, you then get this leap of about 13.5%, which are all the early adopters. And they go, oh, well, maybe there's something about this veganism. Okay, now we know there's a lot of plant-based people, you know, but, you know, same thing with any activism or whatever. Then when it reaches that collective 16% innovators and early ones, we then move into the early majority, which is about 30%. We get this rapid increase in people changing and going with the norm. Then we get the late majority, can't remember the second to last one, and the last one's about 7%, the laggards. In mobile phone terms, they were granny that actually, okay, I'll have a mobile phone because I can't speak to my grandson. In other words, the vast majority of people outside the 2.8% and the 13.2, they're actually following. So in many ways, they're not our low-hanging fruit. They are the people that when the world becomes vegan, that's what they'll do. And they'll fight to the death to say, well, veganism is what we do. It's very hard for us to understand that people can't empathize with it. But we need to focus on the people that empathize with that and go, oh my God, I don't care if I lose my partner, my kids, my family. There's no way I'm being part of that. Nothing will. And if I do that anyway, I'm going along with, you know, I'm not helping my family probably either. So remember that. So don't choose the right battles. We know when to, and I think you're very good on the training of this, Paul, knowing when to withdraw from those conversations on the street because they're taking our time and we know people aren't changing. Usually just leave them with a question. And actually, and also remember that a lot of people say this nonsense because they're embarrassed. They don't want to be that self-conscious by someone they know is seeing it through the lens of changing their own life. But the advocate, who is so affected by this, they're going to give up their Saturday afternoon and get out there. They don't want to feel that self-conscious in front of us to go, oh my God, that's really, they don't want to feel that emotional. You know, they feel shamed or not macho. And I'll give you a quick example of that. I know I said it was only 5 minutes, but I'm really so glad people have come here, and thank you for everything you're doing, everyone. Keep getting out there. I remember after we had the, I think it was when Dominion, the documentary, a year anniversary. Was it the year or maybe the time it actually came out? There was a huge march in Melbourne, Australia with Chris Delforce, and we had a big lorry there with a big video on the outside showing the footage. And afterwards, a number of us went with televisions on and we walked around the streets after it ended. And I remember walking past McDonald's and I was with some AV people there. And this guy came out and started eating his chicken burger and started laughing. And the advocate, and it needed to come from a guy because he was being all macho. If I'd done it or another girl, it would have been, you know, they would have laughed at that. Another bloke looking normal like you, Paul, looked at the guy and said, I get it, mate. You're embarrassed. He said, of course you're laughing. He said, but you don't think that. And it actually, all his energy went out of him once he called it for what it was. He said, but I get it, mate. I used to do that. He said, you don't know what to do you? He said, you feel stupid. You're holding a burger. You've seen this. You don't agree with it. And everything dissolved. So I think it's very important to remember those stupid comments often aren't because people don't give a damn. It's because they're embarrassed. They're at some level, they know if they go down this path, they will lose a lot of things. Things that mattered before won't matter. And they have to ask the question, what else don't I know? So that's important. But Paul, one thing I will just say is this book here I wrote, which is Myths of Choice, Why People Won't Change and What They Can Do About It. If you go onto the veganpsychologist.com/myths, MYTHS, there's a 4-part mini course there just to give you those, you know, why are people so stuck? Why do they say these stupid things? It's generally about, you know, why do people go, oh, we've always done it like that? Or once we can get to the underlying causes of the conformity, we can use clever language to break that trance. And even if they don't become vegan on the spot, they can never look at the issue again without feeling that discomfort. Okay?
Claire, let's wrap this up, but your microphone is being covered by your hand a little bit. Just so you're mindful. That's okay. Your microphone is at the bottom of your phone, and I think your hand is just covering it a little bit. Just so we can wrap this up, you've just directed people to your website regarding that book, Myths of Choice. What else can we provide to, is there anything else that we can perhaps provide to people who are watching, those who are within the AV network? You know, like I said, the goal of this is to make people more active than they currently are, but just having the right tools to be resilient with mental health. So yeah, what else would you recommend that people could do on your website or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of free resources on the website. There's a 30-day called Vegan Voices, which is free 30-day video training on how to talk about issues around veganism. So if you can't get out on the streets, you know, how do you answer these silly questions? You know, but I need my protein. People still say that. It's quite extraordinary. You know, animals overrun the world. What about our Christmas holidays? There's a free 30-day video program on there. Go and get the meditation, and it's one about a vegan world. You know, you can actually get that on how to vision that vegan world based on neuroscientific principles. There's a lot of live streams on there, which is really talks I've given, say at World Vegan Days or animal rights festivals, which are giving tools and techniques to do with, you know, how do we pass that grief through us? Emotional freedom technique. There's a wonderful training on there that you can go onto one of the live streams. I can make it more available if people can't get that easily. Is used in trauma situations. And I know, Paul, you know, we'll have several of these, and then we can come together and create something specific on the activists on the street. You know, I think once, you know, I regroup and we you know, look at some of these comments, we can, and the more, so more people can help us, what is it specifically you need? You know, we can put a little package together for the advocates, you know, just for our own group here. Happy to do that.
Okay, yeah, so for those watching, just so you know, we are going to be doing another one of these in about a week. And based on this live stream and that live stream, and based on the comments we've gotten and the messages we've gotten, you know, we're going to put together a little package, if you will, mental health package that, well, Claire is going to put together for the AV network, for those who are activists within our network who want mental health support but just don't know how to go about it, and feel all these things that we've spoken about, all these symptoms, but just don't know how to manage it. And we're going to be putting that together for you guys. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. We'll put out information about that as soon as possible, but we'll do that after we do our next live stream, which will be in about a week. So you'll see information about that coming soon. Claire, thank you so much for joining this live stream and discussing this very important topic with people. For those of you out there who were watching and paying attention and wanted to be here for the information that we shared in this live stream, thank you. There were many people in the comments that were just talking about irrelevant, off-topic shit and trolling. But many of you were here for the topic that we were discussing. So I appreciate you guys being here for this very important topic. Yeah, we'll see you guys in about a week. We'll do this again, but it will be our nighttime instead of our morning, which will make this available to a different time zone around the world. We're trying to cover all of the, the different time zones that are out there. For now, though, go over to Claire's website. What was the website again, Claire, for everybody?
Easy to remember, veganpsychologist.com. Go and look at the resources. Lots of nice freebies there. And yep, and I send helpful things out. So thank you.
Yeah, so thank you guys for watching. Go over to veganpsychologist.com and check out the resources that she has there. I would highly recommend that you... I prefer audiobooks to reading. I recommend getting the audiobooks that Claire's put together herself. But just go check out her website, and I'm sure that you'll find some good things on there. And yeah, we'll do this in a week, and then after that, we'll hit you guys with a bit of a package that we think will be important for you guys to arm yourselves with, some tools that will help you in your fight to end animal rights violations in our world. Thank you for joining the live stream, everybody. We'll wrap this up now. Claire, thank you. Have a great day.
And you too. Thank you to everyone. Lots of love. Keep going. Bye.